Have you ever felt like you're the only one still trying? Like everyone else moved on, and you're still pushing the same mountain? There's a quiet exhaustion that comes from effort without visible reward, from showing up when nothing seems to change. Today's inner weather forecast is persistence, but not the loud, motivational, never quit kind. I'm talking about the quiet persistence, the kind that builds something in you long before it builds anything around you. This is inner weather, where we look at the emotional climate we're living in and learn how to move through it with more awareness. Let's examine this concept a bit more with the official dictionary definition. Persistence is the steady continuation of effort, despite difficulty, delay, or discouragement. The dictionary also defines persistence as the quality of continuing firmly in a course of action in spite of obstacles. For me, it's pressing on even when you might not feel like it. Unlike intensity, which burns brightly and briefly, persistence is sustained and measured. In other words, we know when we stop working or take too long breaks. It is less about dramatic breakthroughs and more about consistent returning to the practice, the goal, the conversation, the effort. Persistence does not require perfect confidence or constant motivation. It simply requires willingness to continue. Remember this when you're not sure, and be willing to continue. It acknowledges that progress often unfolds gradually, and that meaningful outcomes are usually the result of repeated, steady action rather than sudden transformation. In this way, persistence becomes a quiet agreement we make with ourselves to stay engaged long enough for change to occur. We can all relate to working out at the gym. It takes persistence for results to show, incrementally. As we persist, our bodies take shape and get stronger. So, how does persistence show up in our thoughts, words, and deeds? In our thoughts, persistence appears as long-range perspective. Instead of interpreting setbacks as final conclusions, the persistent mind sees them as temporary conditions or part of a learning curve. Thoughts begin to sound like, "not yet," rather than "never." There is room for adjustment without abandoning direction. Persistence in thinking does not deny frustration, but it reframes it. A difficult moment becomes part of a longer arc, rather than a defining endpoint. In words, persistence sounds steady and forward-moving. Phrases like, "I'm still working on it," "I'll try again," or "this is taking time and that's okay," reflect a refusal to close the door prematurely. Persistent language avoids absolutes and keeps possibility open. In deeds, persistence is visible through repetition. It is showing up for the walk on the 10th day, the 100th day, even when enthusiasm fluctuates. It is revising the draft again, making the call again, practicing the skill again. The deeds of persistence are rarely glamorous. They are consistent, and consistency, over time, reshapes results. How do we apply persistence in our lives? We begin by narrowing focus. Rather than attempting to overhaul everything at once, choose one meaningful area and commit to steady effort there. This might be health and going to the gym, or with creative work and blocking out time to focus. It could be with learning a new skill or improving our relationships. With business, we decide to get better to advance. Start with manageable steps that can realistically be repeated. For example, writing 200 words a day may not feel monumental, but over a year it becomes a book-length manuscript. Walking 30 minutes daily may seem modest, yet over months it reshapes endurance and well-being. Persistence thrives on sustainability. Another way to apply persistence is by separating identity from outcome. Instead of asking, "Am I succeeding?" ask, "Am I continuing?" The act of continuing becomes the measure of progress. This shift reduces pressure and increases resilience. It also helps to build systems rather than rely on mood. As we all know, moods can be fickle friends. Setting a schedule, creating reminders, or designing supportive environments makes persistence easier because it removes constant decision-making. In relationships, persistence might look like continuing to communicate kindly during tension, continuing to show appreciation, continuing to repair misunderstandings by talking things through. In professional life, it may mean refining skills, networking thoughtfully, or pitching ideas repeatedly without internalizing rejection as personal failure. Persistence is applied not through force, but through steady recommitment. Let's look at real-world examples of persistence changing lives. There are so many to visit and get some inspiration. Consider the recent Olympic Games. These athletes have dedicated years to getting the medal and being the best. It may be an extreme example, but it does show us what can be achieved with persistence. And what about the person who decides to return to school later in life? At first, coursework feels overwhelming. Balancing responsibilities with study demands discipline. Yet, as the classes stack up, semester by semester, credits accumulate. Years later, that once distant degree becomes real. The transformation did not happen overnight. It unfolded through persistent enrollment and effort. Or think of someone rebuilding physical health after injury. Progress is incremental. Some days feel discouraging, but consistent therapy, repeated exercises, and small improvements compound. Eventually, mobility returns beyond what once seemed possible. Persistence also changes creative lives. Many authors, artists, and entrepreneurs face repeated rejection before recognition. The difference between those who eventually succeed and those who stop often lies not in talent alone, but in continued submission, continued learning, continued refinement. Even in everyday habits, persistence works quietly. Saving a small amount of money regularly builds financial stability. Practicing calm responses in stressful situations gradually rewires reactions. Over time, small, persistent adjustments reshape character, opportunity, and direction. Persistence turns potential into lived reality because it extends effort long enough for growth to take root. So, what are the advantages of applying persistence in real life? One advantage of persistence is momentum. When effort becomes habitual, starting requires less energy. The barrier shifts from initiating to maintaining, and maintenance is often easier once rhythm is established. Persistence also builds confidence through evidence. Each continued attempt reinforces the identity of someone who follows through. This internal narrative strengthens self-trust. Another advantage is skill development. Mastery rarely arrives instantly. It emerges through repetition. Persistent practice refines ability beyond what initial attempts suggest possible. Persistence also reduces fear of failure. When continuation is the goal, individual missteps lose their power. A setback becomes data rather than defeat. Emotionally, persistence cultivates patience and endurance. It teaches tolerance for delayed gratification, which supports long-term fulfillment over short-term relief. In relationships, persistence fosters stability because consistent effort communicates reliability. In career pursuits, it increases probability. Opportunities often favor those who remain visible and engaged. Perhaps most importantly, persistence aligns intention with action across time. Dreams remain abstract without repeated steps toward them. Persistence bridges the space between vision and reality. Now, you may want to pause the video to answer some self-reflective questions or check back with them later. Here they are. Where in my life have I already practiced persistence, even if I didn't label it that way? Is there an area where I have mistaken slow progress for no progress? What small action could I repeat consistently that would move me towards something meaningful? As we wrap up, remember this. Persistence is the only way to get things done. It might take longer, or you may surprise yourself with a quick win. Either way, having the willingness to continue is a good mantra to have. Thank you for spending this time with me and with yourself. Persistence isn't loud, it's steady, and every quiet step still counts. Inner weather shifts, storms pass, and the sun will shine again. If this reflection resonated with you, stay connected. Subscribe and join me for the next forecast. Until next time, remember your north, south, east, and west. You are enough. You are worthy. And you are becoming the best version of yourself.